Ok. Bom dia, pessoal. Nós chegamos ao último evento que faz parte da programação do Encontros 5, que é esse espaço de conexão dos cientistas que recebem apoio do Instituto Serrapilheira. Agora estamos na nossa versão no mundo real, digital, em função da pandemia, mas vamos em frente. Conforme a gente divulgou anteriormente, esse evento será todo em inglês, não haverá tradução simultânea, mas não se preocupem caso vocês percam alguma informação, porque a gente vai fazer um resumo detalhado do que foi discutido aqui hoje, dos principais pontos. Esse resumo vai ser em português, e nós vamos divulgá-lo no nosso site e nas redes sociais, então não se preocupem com isso. Agora mudando para o inglês. Hello everyone, my name is Cristina Caldas, I'm the Science Director here at Instituto Serrapilheira. On behalf of Serrapilheira's executive team, I welcome you all to this session, which is part of the 5th edition of Encontros Serrapilheira. Encontros is a scientific retreat that we organize for our grantees. Usually this would be an in-person event, but now we are organizing this in its remote format. And this is part of our community building efforts. So we want to make sure all our grantees know each other. So for today's session, we invited Fernando Maestre, speaking from Spain. I'm speaking from Rio, and Fernando is speaking from Spain. Fernando, thank you so much. We are glad to have you here. We will have an informal Q&A session and discussion with Fernando on how to build healthier research labs. This is such a hot and important topic right now, right? We will open up the conversation to the audience, so please write your questions in the YouTube chat. Please write it in English so we make the conversation fluid. But before we start, I just want to take a moment to thank our grantee. One of our grantees, Ricardo Martinez Garcia, he was the one that recommended Fernando to us, so thank you very much, Ricardo. So, Fernando, let's start. I'm going to start with a few questions, and then we can bring the questions from the audience. So, you are currently at the University of Alicante, right, as a distinguished researcher, and also leading the Dry Land Ecology and Global Change Lab. So before we head into the topic of healthier research lab, I just want to know, could you just briefly describe what you study? We're just curious to learn a little bit more about it. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation. It's really my pleasure to be here today to talk about this important topic, and thanks to everyone that is watching this event. So, as you mentioned, I'm working at the University of Alicante, which is in the southeast of Spain, and this is where I come from. I did my bachelor and PhD here at this university. Then I moved to the US for a postdoc. Then I came back to Spain in Móstoles, in the Madrid area, and then after over 14 years working at Rey Juan Carlos University in Móstoles, I moved back to Alicante. And I'm the PI of the Dry Land Ecology and Global Change Lab, and basically we work. I'm an ecologist, and in my lab there is different expertise, but we are mostly biologists. There are some engineers and people with different expertise. But the main topic of our research is trying to understand how dryland ecosystems function and how they are responding to ongoing global environmental change and to other human-induced pressures. We are putting lots of efforts to evaluate the impacts of changes in climate, increasing aridity, changes in temperature, changes in rainfall reduction, and how these impact the biodiversity and different ecosystem processes that are affected by organisms. We are also doing a lot of research on desertification. This is now one of our main topics, and also how other human impacts, for instance, like the use of water in agriculture, what is the environmental cost of some forms of agriculture in drylands, and how this may affect the sustainability of important human activities in these regions, like, for instance, agriculture or grazing.
No, very interesting, Fernando. Thank you. I think we should organize another event just to discuss the science you do, right? But let's move to the topic of this conversation today. So you have all the credentials of a highly successful scientist, right? So you were the only ecologist in Spain that received both the study and the Consolidator ERC grant, the grant from the ERC. You published more than 250 articles in international scientific journals, Science, Nature, PNAS. You are within the top 1% most cited researchers and scientists in the world. You got many research awards. Here I can see in your bio there are many, many research awards that you received, and you also have been elected recently as a fellow of the Ecological Society of America in 2020, right? So you have so many accomplishments. So what led you to advocate for the building of healthier research labs?
Yeah, thanks. That's a very, thanks a lot for the introduction. Yeah, and this is a very interesting question, because if you asked me 3 years ago that I will be today talking to you about this topic, I will say, why? It's not, because this is interesting, because I always have tried, of course, things have changed. I set up my lab over 15 years ago, 16 years ago, more or less. And at the beginning, I was focused a lot on the science, working a lot, just trying to be as productive as possible. And, as in many labs, trying to do like high profile science and working a lot. But things are starting to change as soon as my lab started to grow, and I started to recruit, for instance, technicians that I never had before. No? And then I realized that not everyone shared this vision. That's it. There were some people that just wanted to do their work. They want to do their work very well, but they wanted to have a life after work, which is of course essential. And then for me, another breaking point was having my first child, when then all of a sudden your life changes a lot, and then you realize what important things in life are, right? So I started to change my habits. I started to work less hours, to spend more time with the family, not to work on the weekends, to have more holidays. And then as soon as the lab continued to grow, I quickly realized that we were working better if the people were doing well. Let's say they were, rather than putting a lot of pressure on the people to work more hours to try to be more productive this way. Then I quickly realized that people or we as a lab were functioning better if people were happy, as happy as possible. Of course, we all have problems and we cannot solve all the problems at work. And I quickly realized that things could be done better in another way. And of course, over the years, just trial and error, I have been learning a lot over the years. I just changing the way that I was managing my lab. But at the end, we created, or I tried to create, an environment within my lab where everyone could be, safe, happy, work in a healthy way, respecting holidays, respecting, afternoons, working only the hours that we need to work, and of course, listening to people, supporting them, and so on and so forth. But of course, I was doing this internally, just as part of my lab. And everything started, when I decided that I should start to advocate about this, is when I was invited to a seminar over a couple of years ago to Madrid, and we were discussing over dinner with my host. And yeah, we started to talk, about our careers, science, and so on. And he was mentioning that person that he came from a toxic lab, this type of labs, which unfortunately are quite common, where the PI was controlling everyone, wanted everyone working every day. That person even got the PI during the weekends to check who was in the lab and so on and so forth. I'm sure that many people listening to us will be familiar with this type of situation. And then I explained how we were doing in my lab, which we are doing just the opposite, and he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. He told me, "Oh, Fernando, I can't believe it, how you, with your productivity, with your success, so on and so forth, that you can behave this way." And that was over the dinner. And on the next morning, I wake up and I say, well, I think we need to put, and I'm an active user of Twitter. I like this tool a lot. And then I put some tweets about it, because just to say, well, it seems that this can be a topic that can interest many people. And then the Twitter got crazy, that thread got, I don't know, several hundreds of likes, a few hundreds of retweets and so on. And all of a sudden I realized, after looking at this feedback, that there were like a need of examples like the ones that we were doing, or like we are doing in my lab, because this could help other colleagues. And then soon after this tweet, I realized that it would be nice to write a piece. So I approached Nature to see if they would be interested in writing a piece for these Nature careers. They liked the idea, and we published these short pieces about the 7 steps toward healthy labs. That also got a lot of dissemination in social media. I got lots of emails, comments, people thanking me and telling me that they really like it. But because of the nature of this comment that was very short, I couldn't say all the things that I wanted to say. And then I decided to write this 10 simple rules piece, which, as you know, has been gone like crazy. Lots of interest, lots of downloads, lots of activity on Twitter and social network about it. And this is how everything started. And then I become more involved. I started to give talks. I started to get invitations. Many people asking me about advice. Yeah, I think that's an important topic, because as we can hopefully will discuss during the session, there is a real need for. I always like to say that success can be measured in many ways. There is not a single definition of success, because every person is different and we all have different goals in our lives. But I think it's very, we all have in mind this idea of a successful scientist, as a man, typically a white man, that devotes his life, to science, sacrificing, family, friends, hobbies, and I think it's important to show that, of course, if you want to publish as many papers as, or as much papers as possible, maybe you need to work as many hours as possible. But if you want to do better science, there is another way of doing it. And to me, I use, of course, I don't want to say that what we do can work for everyone, but it's an example that you can have a fruitful research career, you can have an impact, both in science and beyond, having also a life, enjoying your life, and helping others to also fulfill their professional goals and their personal goals too. So this is how everything started. I was not planning, this. Some people have asked me if I have formal training in psychology or things like that. I have not training at all. Everything has been learning, trial and error. Some things have worked, and then I keep them. Some things didn't work, so I change them. And at the end, I like to say that it's not so special. It's just trying to apply common sense. I think, trying to apply common sense that many times is unfortunately is not commonly applied. And I like to follow many in Spanish. In Spanish, we call them refranes, this kind of proverbs, which are very, I like them a lot. And some of them are very sabios in Spanish. It's like very wise. They are like very wise pieces of knowledge, and just applying common sense, learning over the years, and listening. That's very important. No, many times PIs are not used to listen to the needs and the requirements of the people working with them, and with some steps being polished over the years. I think it's possible to have like a fruitful and very satisfactory research career, an impactful one, but also having a life, which at the end, this is one of the most important things we need. I would like to share with the audience, is that it's not needed to sacrifice your life in order to have a scientific career.
Yeah, you mentioned in one of your lectures that labs can be machines to destroy people, right? So you're showing how to do different. So also, I'm just gonna start sharing some comments from the audience here. So Fernanda Werneck is just, she's thankful. Thank you for the important discussion. Fernando talks and papers are so cool and full of great tips. So she's one of our grantees, and I hopefully this information can be used by the larger academic community as well, Fernando. So
many thanks.
Yeah. So, yeah, you mentioned that in science, we don't talk about the ugly and the bad, right? Usually we only talk about the positive things. And what are some of these taboos that you fear we don't talk about?
Yeah, I think one of the most, there are multiple of them, right? For instance, we have abuse, bullying, and also mental health issues, right? We also, because these are things that nobody talk about, but they are there and they are quite prevalent as we are starting to see now as more surveys and studies are showing, right? Is that the prevalence of issues like depression, like other mental health issues, high stress loads, and the imposter syndrome, and so on and so forth is quite prevalent in academia. But this is something that we never talk about before. Why? Because this was like a symptom of weakness, right? You cannot be, this is like, it's natural selection, right? If you want to stay on the race, right, you need to be like a strong competitor. If you are not strong enough, it's that you are not fit for this work, right? This is for many years what we have been told in many labs around the world, right? Is that science is very complicated. You need to work very hard. That's always having the mantra, right? And we know that, of course, work hard is important, but it's not enough anymore, right? You can work as hard as you can, and that's no longer a warranty of success. And I always, and this is the problem, is a taboo because we cannot solve the problems we don't talk about, right? If we don't talk about an issue, that issue is like if it doesn't exist, right? So I think it's very important to be more open, to open spaces for discussion and to share experiences. This is my main motivation for doing all this, is to share my experience with the aim to help others. In Spain, we say that every teacher has its own book. I don't want to say that what we do can work for everyone and for in every country, because there are many the cultural, socioeconomical situations of different institutions and countries are completely different. And so what we do I know that it will not work in other places, but I think it's important just to open these spaces for making these topics that traditionally have been a taboo, to make them public with the aim to open a discussion about them, to try to find solutions. We may not find solutions for all the topics, and because at the end we are living in a very competitive world. And this is not going to change, even if we are work like we do and are very happy and so on. The competition is going to be there because at the end there are more people fighting for resources, like resources available, right? But this happens in almost every field, not only in science, right? In the private sector, in many companies, the working environment is very competitive. But I think these taboos, and also of course there are other very important ones, crucial ones, particularly for women, like harassment, and for minorities, racism, and these are very important topics that now, fortunately, we are talking more about it, and we are starting to address them and to address the foundation of our systems, because the foundation of our systems are behind many of the problems that we are facing today, particularly those related to xenophobia, racism, harassment, this ultra competitive environment. This is, at the end, is part of a culture, right? And cultural things come from long ago. So, and yeah, they need to change. But in order to change, we need to realize that these are real problems. And in order to realize that these are real problems, we need to put them on the table.
Yeah, I totally agree. We should talk about more often, right? Open spaces for this kind of discussion. So we have a question from Rafael Zeni. The science landscape in Brazil is changing quickly in recent years. Less funding, less scholarships, and there is pressure to keep high productivity. I see some parallel in Spain as well, right?
Yeah.
So any tips on how to protect lab mental health in this landscape of limited and diminishing resources?
Yeah, this is like a $1 million question, right? Because here in Spain, we face the same, particularly for young scientists, is that the competition is extreme, right? So there is the system, there is a huge pressure on researchers, particularly early career ones, in order to become as productive as possible, to publish as much as possible, and to keep on the loop, right? So, of course, I don't have a silver bullet for this, no, because sometimes people ask me, well, say, well, if I will have an answer for that, I will be in the ministry, right, trying to solve this type of problems, right? But I think we can do a lot, because there are one thing is that, and this is a problem that, for instance, I have seen in Spain in many places, is that we confound productivity with number of hours that we spend at our workplace, right? And for instance, sometimes we are quite inefficient because, let's say, we can spend 10 hours in our office, but we may make frequent breaks. You know, we don't focus. So one thing that I think is very, very important is try to work less hours, but be more focused. You know, try to get less distractions, you know, get away from social media. There are multiple ways of doing it, but I think this is the number one, because we can be equally productive, you know, if we are more focused, working less hours. If we work less hours, that's very important, because having, you know, free time for our hobbies, for spending time with our friends, for spending time with our family, will reduce a lot our stress levels. If we reduce our stress levels, we'll be able to think better. We'll be able to be more creative. And remember, sometimes we only count the number of papers, but I guess in Spain it's becoming more and more important, you know, where we publish, rather than how many papers we are able to publish. And
quality versus quantity, yeah.
And we all want to publish like in top journals. We want our papers to be highly cited and so on and so forth. So in order to get this type of work, sometimes the quality is at odds with quantity. And to me, you know, working less hours, but in a more focused way. Of course, that's important. If we don't use our time more wisely, at the end, if we work lower number of hours, we will reduce our productivity. But if we are able to focus, we will be able to maintain and even increase, because I have experienced this in my lab over the years, is that we are more productive now than ever, working many less hours than we used to work in the past as a lab, right? And this is because we are much more focused, and because, you know, having, some people don't believe me, and some people think that this is just wishful thinking, but no. Let's say having a break is critical. If you work 7 days a week, you know, you do this 3 weeks, and the 4th week you are completely burned out. And if you are highly stressed, you are burned out. You cannot produce. You know, in the same way, you are sick, you stay at home, right? At bed. If you are at bed, you cannot work, right? This is the same. If you are really, really under pressure, you are really, really under high stress, you cannot be creative, you cannot be productive. Of course, I know that the system has a lot of pressure, but I think the number one rule to try to compensate for this is trying to be more efficient, and very important, leave time out of work, trying to disconnect. You know, for instance, I like to run. I'm a runner, and to me, running a little bit every day is a wonderful way to reduce my stress levels. So just do whatever you like to do outside work, because this, of course, you do in a week, you will not realize, but if you do this on a regular basis, after a few weeks, you will realize that you can focus more, you can be more productive, and at the mid to long term, your work is going to have a much larger impact. Of course, this is something, for instance, that you can do at the early career level, right? Individually. But there are also many, many, many simple things that we can do that can make our life much better, and even without realizing that it will make you feel better and it will make you more productive. For instance, just something as simple as say giving thanks, being thankful. You know, you will be surprised if you start to say thank you more often, how well this make you feel, and how well this make this simple thing that costs nothing makes feel others. It's important also to create support networks. You know, have friends, have colleagues in the same situation as you, where you can talk about tips about how to, you know, how do you do to, you know, stay healthy, to not to work so many hours, things like that. And of course, talk to your advisors, talk to your PIs, because it's very important to talk. And of course, for them, it's very important to listen. because sometimes there is a lot of not miscommunication, but just lack of communication, and this lack of communication is really harmful, particularly for early career researchers. So yeah, I don't have a silver bullet, but there are like several simple things that can be done that can be quite helpful to, if not solve this pressure, all the issues associated to this extreme pressure, to make them less harmful to us. So as we say in Spain, yeah, more llevaderos, no? Sean más llevaderos. I don't know. I guess you will have something similar in Portuguese. I'm sorry, I cannot say this in English.
No, wonderful. I totally agree that we cannot be creative when your brain is under such a stress, right? It's impossible to have good ideas when you are under such stress. So Marina Hirota, she's one of our grantees as well. She asks, I think it's important that a scientist with your story advocates on this topic. You mentioned the difference in your life, but what differences did you notice in people from your lab? And also, if I could add, just I think people are very different. So how do you manage all the differences in your lab members as well?
Yeah, many thanks, Marina, for this question that is important. For me, something that I quickly realized is that as a PI, is that the lab is heterogeneous, right? Not everyone has the same objectives. Not everyone has the same potential, and not everyone wants to follow the same path, right? So, so something that I do, for instance, is never compare anyone with anyone. Never, because and you can imagine, I had PhD that got a Nature from their PhD or papers in Nature Ecology and Evolution, like in top profile PNAS, and this puts a lot of pressure on other PhD students, right? Because let's say, oh, if other PhD students in my lab have got these papers, then there is the expectation that I have to got them to. And of course, the first day, this is the first thing I told to them: I will not compare you with anyone. And this is important to account for this heterogeneity. And of course, I had people in my lab that work a lot, and I have to put the brakes on them all the time. Some of them don't listen to me, either because they like to do it, or either because they feel they have to do it. But of course, what I always do is trying to push them and trying to tell them what may happen, because at the end they are very young. If they continue doing this way, sometimes they listen to me, sometimes don't. But what is very important, and this is, for instance, for those grantees that are starting to set up their own labs, is that we don't have this expectation, and that we don't have the expectation that people have to do what we did in the past. When I was a postdoc, I work a lot, but I don't expect my postdocs in my lab to work as I used to work when I was a postdoc. That's something very important. And something that I have realized over the years is that these policies to create a healthier environment make the people to be really, really focused, and really to be really compromiso in Spanish. It's like to just to feel that they are engagement. So they feel really engaged with the lab and with the research we do, and this fosters a lot of internal collaborations, and these internal collaborations increase the productivity of the lab and of every individual involved. So and this is something that I have noted over the years, that we are becoming much more efficient because of this. It's because I never have controlled people. So when people knows that, if you trust the people working with you, at the end, and you take care of them, at the end they give their best. And if everyone give their best during the working time, things work. Things or it's much easier to work than, can you imagine that you have a PI that is pushing you all the time, to work as many hours as possible, to not to have holidays, people that don't even respect when you are sick or when you are passing through personal problems, somebody very close to you dies, or, there are lots of issues in our daily lives, and we really need, and can you imagine that those people suffering from this behavior from the PIs, how do you think that they are going to show compromise to the lab, or that they can be really productive? My experience tells that this is not how the things work, or it doesn't work always this way. Some people can work under a lot of pressure. Some people do, that's true. But my experience is that going the other way around, of course, things take time. Don't expect that doing this you will see immediate results. You will need to wait for a few months. But my experience is that doing this, and I think I never like to talk about myself, but I think our lab is an example of how have a productive, impactful lab, with successful research lines and just following this way of working. I don't know, Marina, if I answered your question, but yeah, it's not. There is not a single thing. But at the end, I think one of the key messages is that if you are healthy, you are doing well, you are working well, and if you are working well, you are productive. No matter what. Of course, that doesn't mean that everything is going to go well always. That doesn't mean that your papers will be accepted the first time you submit them, and that you will always be successful with your grant application. No, but the science is like running a marathon, right? And I'm a marathon running, and I know this very well. If you go very fast, faster than you really can during the first kilometers, no way you are going to be able to finish the race. So that's something very important.
So Fernando Werneck has a question. Consider that many of the steps differ a lot from the default way groups are often led. How your approach is perceived by other groups at your institution and other institutions as well? And
thanks. This is a very interesting question because I have like mixed experiences. Some people really appreciate what we do, and some people either don't believe it, or either because they don't do this, it's like that they don't want to accept, or they try to diminish, this way of working. But I have to say that most of the feedback that I'm getting about now that we have become public about this, that I have now advocating for this, is very positive. It's something, and I have a lot of comments from fellow PIs and from colleagues that they really would like to improve, the way that they are managing their labs, and I think more and more people are following this path. It's not easy, particularly because, as I said before, at the end it's a cultural thing, right? If you are in an institution with this culture, all the labs follow this culture. As you can imagine, if you try to set up another different culture, at the beginning, it clashes with the way of that other labs behave. But in my experience, even if sometimes some experience has not been very good, but overall has been very, very, very positive, because it's something that is good, right? It's good for the people, it's good for the institution, it's good for the system, and at the end, if there is something that is good, why not to follow, right?
And also, you're proving that it works, right? It works when you follow this.
Yeah, question. I don't want to say that this will work for everyone, in every country, under every situation, but at least it may work, and for us, it really works.
Wonderful. So I'm going to combine two questions here. One is from Ricardo Martinez Garcia, who was the one that recommended you to us. So he thanks for the organizing the discussion, and we many times focus on the many positive things this lab, how they organize it. We're talking about this briefly, right? Have you experienced negative situations due to running your lab like this? And also, let me just add another question from Ayla, because it's related. Could you comment a bit on the things you tried that didn't work, and why do you think they didn't work?
Yeah, these are also very, very important questions. Is that I have to say that I have been really lucky with most of lab members over the years, wonderful people, and of course we had sometimes not, I like to say that we are humans, we are very complex, right? And we cannot all be friends or agree in all the situations, right? So I had some but it's almost, so I don't want to, it's almost anecdotal, right? But I had sometimes situations where people just don't believe on this. So it's like, let's say, when you try to argue with an anti-vaccine people, right? Sometimes it's not easy. But I like to say, in Spain, we say that talking, no, hablando se entiende la gente, no. We understand each other by talking, no. And at the end, I think this is the most important thing, is just to talk. And for instance, one of the things that one of my mistakes at the beginning is that I didn't listen enough. I just wanted to, I had a view and I want to everyone follow this view. And this is one of the things, for instance, that didn't work. And I quickly realized that this, with some people, create some conflicts because, they, as I mentioned before, some people, they want just to do their work and they want to do their work very well, but this they work. Don't expect them to do more because they are not willing to do it. And at the beginning, I had some clashes with some people in the lab, but then I realized that was my mistake, not their mistake. And something that is true that not everyone, because of different reasons, for personal, because you don't have the personal feeling or relationship, it's not the same with everyone, that's something common. We are humans, right? We cannot get along very well with everyone. But for instance, sometimes people haven't behaved nicely to other lab members, no? And in this case, for instance, the situation was solved just by talking and by understanding that that's very important. Something that I always try to do is to put myself in the skin of the other, right? Is to try to understand why the other person is doing things this way, right? And this at the end becomes solved. And something that is also I have found over the years is that once that you have a nice, healthy environment, even if somebody tries to boycott this, it's very difficult because it's that person realized that he or she is isolated, right? And then it usually works the other way around. Someone that may not believe in this way of work eventually believe on it or respect it, because he or she sees that it works. But I have to say that I have been extremely lucky with all my lab members over the years, wonderful people, and we are doing the lab, or my lab is today like it is because of the people over the years that have shaped the way that we work. And for me, of course, there have been conflicts, as we are humans, but all the conflicts, we have solved the conflicts just talking openly, without imposing things, and trying to understand each other and finding common ground, even when there is disagreement. Because the problem is many times we cannot solve problems because we don't find common ground, but because we don't find it because we don't look for it. So finding this common ground when problems arise, I think is very important. And even more important than this is that to open to talk quickly when problems arise, because sometimes if you don't talk quickly, problems become like bigger and more difficult to solve. So that's quite important thing to do.
So we have a question from Tiago Pereira, who's also our grantee. Fernando, did you follow Project Aristotle by Google? If so, did you try some version of it in your group?
Thanks, Tiago, for this question, but I have no idea what Project Aristotle by Google is. I have no idea, so yeah, I'm sorry, I haven't followed it.
Tiago mentioned something about this project to me once, but I wish I could open the microphone so he can tell, but there's no...
Yeah. No, as I say, I have done this just by trial and error, and I don't like to follow like strict protocols. This is like a combination of things that we have been doing over the years that work for us, and this is the 10 rules are those rules that have worked for us, and that may work for, as I say, not for everyone, but may work for others. But yeah, I will check this. I'm always, of course, open to improve the way that we work, and yeah, I'm sure that this will be interesting. So I will check it. Thanks for the suggestion.
Yeah. So Daniel Valente, thanks for sharing your experience. Usually when we go against the stream, we pay a high price. What did you pay to go against the stream of pressure for productivity?
That's a very important question, but I'm sorry, but I don't think I can answer it in public because that will involve other people that I don't think it's there is always a price to pay, a price to pay when you try to do things differently. And of course, I also have paid some price, but I'm sorry. If I hope that you will understand that I will not. We can talk in private if you wish, but I don't think that's a question to be discussed in public because it involves other people, and I don't think it's pertinent for this discussion. But there is always a price to pay when you try to do things differently from the mainstream, right? It's always, unfortunately, it's always the same. But it can be done. At the end, it's a trade-off when let's say when the reward is higher than the price to pay. Is totally worth it. So, I'm sorry not to be able to give more details, but yeah, I think this is more a topic for a private conversation.
Yeah, I understand. So in your 2019 PLOS Computational Biology article, which became quite, a lot of people read it, right? You listed these 10 rules, right? So you have very objective 10 rules for creating healthier research labs. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about, expand the discussion about these rules. So which ones you would say are easier to implement and which ones are more challenging in your opinion?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good question. No, perhaps to me, not to me, but I think one of the rules that can be more difficult to implement, like at a large scale, is respect working hours and respect holidays and weekends. Because of the cultural tradition in academia that you need to work really, really hard, you need to work many hours, you need to sacrifice everything to succeed, right? Because this is the message that we always got. And changing this mind, or in order to, making everyone to realize of the importance of having a life after work, because this at the mid to long term, as I say, this will not change you in a matter of days, but it will change you in a matter of months. This at the end will make it more productive. So this is, to me, perhaps is one of the most difficult to implement at a large scale. But some others are very easy to implement. Just being thankful, just recognize the work of your peers, right? If you are a PI, realize of the importance of the work that everyone does, and don't steal the credit of other contributors, right? And just saying thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for being there. Thank you for your support. Thank you for. There are lots of things to be thankful for, and this is, to me, that's something very easy to do. That it can be applied. Of course, another rule, and now the pandemic has shown that it's possible to do it. It's much easier than many people believe. Is we need to be flexible the way we work. For instance, I have been working remotely at least between 1 or 3 days per week for years. I have been staying working at home many days for different reasons, and I always have been very, very keen to facilitate this type of remote agreements when these help people in my lab to match their personal and professional life. I have had people working remotely for months without putting a foot in the lab, and this is something that for years we always had this. At least in Spain. Spain is a country where if you are not in your office working a lot of hours, it's like if you are not working. And now the pandemic has shown that we can work remotely. No, of course, not everyone can work remotely every day. And lab technicians need to be in the lab every day, of course. He or she cannot work remotely. But this is, for instance, also a rule that can be implemented quite easily. And also not controlling the schedule, because I firmly believe that we should be evaluated by the results of our work, not by the amount of hours that we work. And yeah, this is, for instance, these are some of the rules that can be applied without a lot of effort, and that really can make a huge difference.
Great. So we have a comment here from Ana Carla Goldberg. She couldn't agree more with you. As a mother of three, while being a researcher, and quality, not quantity, should be our focus. And she has a question: what your ideas on incorporating these into good lab practices?
I completely agree with you. Thanks, Anna, for this question. So, for instance, one for us as a lab, and to me as a PI, we no longer are looking for quantity. We are looking for quality, and for to sacrifice, not to sacrifice. When looking for quality, for instance, to me, it's very important not to when we start a project, we set up experiments. We don't set up things to say, okay, let's see how many papers we can get. Let's see how we can slice the data, the results to get as many publications as possible. No, just working the other way around is let's see how we can make the best paper possible with the experiment, the data that we have. Of course, that doesn't mean that all the papers we do all the studies we do go to high-profile journals. That's an unrealistic assumption. Of course, don't think that, particularly because let's say if you need to build a house, you need to build from the basement, not from the roof, right? If you have a PhD student, he or she first need to start to write, right? And you cannot pretend that he or she can get the head of or his first paper in Nature or Science, right? Sometimes happen, but it's quite unlikely. So I think the most important thing is to focus on trying to get the best product. We are talking about publications, the best paper as possible, without being worried about producing as many papers as possible. This is, to me, one of the main goals. Of course, some experiments projects are larger, some others are like smaller. Sometimes we get like small papers from pilot studies or from some studies that didn't go as well as planned. So we all have only like a subset of the data that we were planning to get, and of course we publish like more normal or more smaller papers. But of course, because that's something also important for us, is we try to publish, of course, all the results of our research, because this is part of our work as scientists. If we don't publish, we don't communicate our science, right? But to me, publication is a way to communicate. It's not the goal per se, trying to get as many papers as possible. So if we change the focus, let's say, rather than trying to get as many papers as possible, trying to get papers that are relevant and that can make a difference, this is, of course, it will not be like a first, like an immediate change, but at the mid to long term, it will contribute to produce fewer number of papers, but of higher quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with something related, also a comment by Carmen Penido. Consider that a healthy research environment also promotes research integrity. Do you think this topic should be more often discussed in workshops and courses, including students and senior scientists? Can be part of good lab practices as well, right?
Of course, yeah. This is a critical topic. Thanks for raising this question, because this is also part of a healthy lab culture. Because if you are working under a lot of pressure, particularly to publish, lots of pressure can make you cross the line of doing unethical things. And we have seen lots of examples of this, because the excess of pressure, people start creating fake data to change the results and to lie at the end, and to break down the trust. Because I one of the things that I say to everyone, my lab is one of the most important things we have as scientists is that our colleagues and society is trusting us. And there is no way, when you submit a paper, it's very difficult to demonstrate if what you are putting on the paper is true or not, right? Of course, then when people try to replicate, then if they do, then things may some of these, when people behave unethically, many people got caught, right? But I think this is a critical topic that needs to be, of course, this is another taboo, right? That is it needs to be discussed much more. And of course, we need a lot of training. In the same way that in order to, I cannot, or institutions cannot pretend that all the labs became healthy, like my lab, just by trying and trial and error. It's very important to do training. It's very important to provide training for early career researchers about how to manage stress. It's very important for PI to provide training on mentoring. And it's very important, both for PIs and for early career researchers, for researchers at any career, to get more training on integrity, on ethics, because at the end, it's one of the most important things in science. Without ethics, there is no science.
Yeah, wonderful. So, Fernando, I know you conducted research in the US, UK, Australia, China, Germany. What about Brazil? Do you have any connections to Brazil? Have you ever met with any of our scientists?
Yeah, I have, because we do, I didn't mention about my work, right? But we do a lot of, we work in global drylands, right? So we have partners in Brazil, and for instance, in some of our projects, we have done global field surveys, collecting field data in drylands from all over the world. And in our projects, we have sites in Brazil, in the Caatinga, for instance. Now we have sites close to the Cerrado. And I also have a very good friend who works with earthworms, and George Brown, and maybe someone of you know him. And he's in. I will come later with the name of the city where he's based. So yeah, I have connections in Brazil, and of course, I'm always willing and open to get new collaborations. And I would love at some point to visit Brazil, because I have been in Argentina multiple times. I have been in Chile. I have been in Mexico, in Venezuela. I have been in Ecuador. I have been in many Latin American countries, but for one reason or another, I didn't have the chance to visit Brazil, but I have a scientific connections there.
Mm-hmm. So we have one question from Frederico Reni, one of our grantees as well, on this issue of quality versus quantity, and all this pressure towards publishing as much as possible is reinforced by the way jobs are selected in science, right? So that's an issue of how do you select? How can a young scientist go against this?
Yeah, it's a very relevant question, and it's very difficult because it needs to be changed at the institutional level and at the lab level. Because, for instance, for me as a PI, when I hire postdocs with my own funds, I no longer look at the number of publications, and I no longer look at the impact factor of the journals. I look for particular skills, right? And I know it's difficult when you are fighting for competitive grants, public grants. I know that quantity so far has been like one of the main drivers of success. But for instance, things are starting to change here in Spain. Even in very competitive proposals, now the panels are looking at more things beyond the number. Because, of course, if I'm evaluating a CV with 2 papers in science, to me, that CV says something, right? And maybe that CV, because of the nature of that particular, these 2 papers, it can be more relevant than having 15 papers in other journals. And I'm not talking about the journals. I'm talking about the sample of science, because if you publish in science, it's because your work has something. That doesn't mean that may be better than other type of work, but it says that it can be of particular or potential relevance. So it's true that at the end, we are all part of a game, and of course the game needs to be changed. And I think more and more people agree. Of course, we are still discussing a lot how to change it to make it less stressful, particularly for young scientists, and the pressure and the stakes are high. But even when you have a lot of pressure to publish, if you are working on an environment which is healthy, the pressure will be a lower pressure, because still, if you follow this advice of getting some breaks, of having time for yourself, having a support network, having a PI that listens to you and that stands with you when there are problems and so on. Even this is not, we as PIs cannot change the system, right? But can make it better or slightly better. And my experience, and of course, I'm in a position when I'm actively advocate within my university to make this aware of these topics within the panels. When I'm in a panel, Of course, sometimes we have like very strict instruction that we need to look to these items, but when not, I'm always, looking for other things. And for instance, when I'm hiring people myself with my own funds, I no longer look at the number of papers. So you can imagine if all the PIs hiring people with their own funds, which worldwide it's a lot. We are talking about hundreds, thousands of positions. Will do this, the pressure will be reduced. Of course, there will be always highly competitive calls in the same way that when I submit an application for a grant, I know the success rate will be lower than 10%, no matter what. But if, let's say, can you imagine if more and more PIs look at other things beyond the number of papers, globally, the pressure will start to reduce. So yeah,
And
we
also,
cannot solve everything, but I think that's something very, very important.
Yeah, so Frederico adds that should it be something that is tackled top-down, perhaps by coordinated efforts by societies, funders, and the such. So at Serrapilheira, we don't count the number of papers, so we look for quality, and that's what we're trying to do.
Things are starting to change because, for instance, the Wellcome Trust in the UK, which is one of the main funders of biomedical research, are starting to change. I know that some European funders are starting also to, for instance, in the UK, they no longer look at the impact factor of the journals. For instance, the ERC in Europe, they also look at many more things rather than the impact factor and the number of papers. And things are starting to change in Spain too. Still, the competition is so intense that at the end, the number of papers is like something very important. But things are starting to change, and I agree. Of course, at the end, it needs to be like a coordinated effort and a global one in order to have a global impact. But I think we are going in that direction. It still will take time, unfortunately, because also the resources. At the end, it's a matter of resources, right? Unless more resources are available, the pressure will still be high. But I think that I'm optimistic that before I got retired, the situation will be worldwide much more healthier. I'm really hopeful for so.
Yeah. So, Fernando, unfortunately, we have to begin wrapping up our conversation. But before we do that, I just wanted to know if you had any last words or advice for our cohort of young Brazilian scientists.
Yeah, well, of course, I will send my best regards and just try not to do what others tell you to do. Just try to do what you think that is best for you, for your career, for your country, for your system. And something very important: be kind. I think that's something that we need to be more kindness. We need to be more thankful. We need to just try to be better persons, right? Because if we are better persons and we help each other, things will go much better. And I think you really are in a position to make a difference in your case, in Brazil, in the Brazilian scientific system. And I'm really hopeful for the new generations that you will correct some of the systemic problems that our scientific system have. So even if I know that it's very difficult, I know that you have a lot of uncertainty, I know that you have a lot of pressure, but be kind, look for advice, and try to follow what you think that you should do. Just try to follow your instincts, trying to follow your desires. And I don't want to think that this is like wishful thinking. I don't want to see like one of these books that people trying to sell you something. Is that this is something that I have done also and during my career under difficult situations too. And at the end, it can work. That doesn't mean that it will work for everyone. That doesn't mean that all of you will succeed. But I'm pretty convinced that it can be done, and a better science can be done. And you are the people will really push towards this change. So yeah, all the best.
Wonderful, Fernando. Well, thank you once again for your time. This was great. And we really appreciate it and hope to meet you in person here in Brazil in the near future.
Yeah,
so let's
that would be wonderful.
To come here so you can meet our scientists in person.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Thanks for the question. I enjoyed this time, and I hope that you will have found this conversation useful. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bye bye. Have a nice day. Thank you.
You too.